Alright, this is our last video. It says in number 23, use this payment formula. It says suppose you borrow $20,000 for 4 years at 8% toward the purchase of a car. Find the monthly payments and the total interest for the loan. So this is what we call an installment loan, where you're borrowing some fixed amount, and then you're going to make payments for a number of years to pay it back, where your payments are all equal in size. So we call this an installment loan. So let's go ahead and use the formula, and I'm just going to put in the numbers here. So suppose you borrow $20,000, that's your starting amount, or P, and also referred to as the principal value, for 4 years, so our time is 4. R is 8%, or 0.08, written as a decimal. Find the monthly payments. Now if you're making monthly payments, that means your N is 12 in the formula here. 12 times a year they're applying interest. Actually, that's not the way I want to say it. It's just because of this is the number of payments per year. And then total interest, we're supposed to find the monthly payments and the total interest for the loan. So the key is, let's see, we should have all our numbers now. Let's go ahead and plug them in. So our P value is 20,000 times the interest rate, 0.08, over N, which is 12. In the denominator, we have 1 minus parenthesis 1 plus 0.08 over 12. That's our R over N. To the negative N, which is 12, times T, which is 4 power, into parenthesis. So this is what we need to plug into our calculator. Let's go ahead and do that. So again, I would hit the fraction button first. You got 20,000, 1, 2, 3, parenthesis, 0.08. And then I'd hit the fraction button over 12. Now you could hit the fraction button first, it doesn't matter. But again, as you're typing in the numbers, you should see it look just like it does on paper. And in the denominator, we have 1 minus parenthesis 1 plus 0.08, fraction button 12, into parenthesis, and then don't forget your exponent button, and that will be negative 12. Make sure you use the negative button, not the subtraction button, times 4. And finally, we want to do our right parenthesis, but we need to arrow right first, because we don't want it just around the exponent, we want it around the whole denominator. Alright, so again, you can see the arrow here, and you can arrow back if you want to check what you put in, make sure everything looks right. And when you put that in, you should get 488. Now it didn't tell you to round to the nearest dollar, but that's what they're using. This is 488. Of course, if you look at our answers, you can see they rounded to the nearest dollar. Now, it's going to be either A or B. It says find the monthly payments, we found that, and the total interest for the loan. Well, we paid $488. See, we need to find out, we paid $488 per month for 4 years. So that would be times 12 times 4, which means we actually paid $23,424, and we borrowed $20,000. That means if we subtract 20,000, that'll tell us what we actually paid for interest, which is $3,424. Now, the question you have to ask yourself, is it worth it for me to spend that much money in interest for 4 years in order to borrow this money, or do I want to wait a little bit longer so I don't have to borrow so much money? And those are the kinds of questions you have to ask yourself when you make a big purchase. Anyway, but that would indicate that our answer is letter C here. Let's move on to 24. It says, suppose your credit card has a balance of $5,600 and an annual interest rate of 16%, which is pretty typical. In fact, you may be paying more than that, especially younger people or people that don't have a lot of credit. You decide to pay off the balance over 3 years. So in other words, you're going to treat it like a installment loan. You're going to make equal payments for 3 years. And we're assuming there's no further purchases charged to the card. So it sounds like this is somebody that's trying to pay off their credit card using payments. And so that's why we use the payment formula that we used up above. So it says, how much must you pay each month? That's going to be our payment. And how much interest will you pay? All right, so let's go ahead and figure out our payment. It's going to be $5,600, which is what we're going to borrow, or P, times the interest rate, which is 16%, so 0.16, over N, which is 12. These are monthly payments. And then in the denominator, we'll have 1 minus parenthesis 1 plus 0.16 over 12 to the negative, and N is 12, and the number of years here was 3. That's our T. And so this is what we need to plug into our calculator. All right, so let's see, we got fraction 5,600, parenthesis 0.16, fraction button 12, arrow to the right, into parentheses. And let's go to the denominator. We have parenthesis 1 minus parenthesis 1 plus 0.16 fraction 12, arrow to the right. Oh shoot, I made a mistake. Let's see, I'm going to just delete the whole line there. I messed up. 5,600, 0.16 fraction 12. Oops, and I did it again. Let's see, let's get rid of that. We can hit delete. There we go. Now, what I didn't do last time is, now I'm in the denominator. We've got 1 minus parenthesis 1 plus 0.16 fraction 12, arrow over into parenthesis. Don't forget your exponent button. Negative 12 times 3, or you could just put negative 36 there. And then I'm going to arrow right and put in my last parenthesis. And now, that's going to give us a correct answer. You'll notice in the answers they're rounding to the nearest dollar. So this is going to be 197. Well, the other thing you're asked for is how much your interest is going to be. Well, you're paying 197 12 times a year for 3 years. If you multiply that out, you get $7,092. If we subtract the $5,600 we borrowed, we're looking at $1,492. All right, now it says, now suppose you decide to pay off the balance over 1 year rather than 3. How much more must you pay each month? Now notice It doesn't say what must you pay each month, it says how much more. So the nice thing about the calculator here is we can actually arrow up to our expression and hit enter, and we can change our time. Instead of 3 years, we want it to be 1. So I'm going to make that a 1, and that's the only time we use R in the formula, or I should say T, the time. And so now I'm going to arrow out and hit enter, and you get 508. So $508 is the amount you would pay. By the way, if you took 508 minus 197, that's 311. So that's the difference. So that's probably enough to tell us the final answer, but just in case, how much are we going to pay? We're going to pay 508 for 12 months times 1 year. I mean, you can say times 1, but that's just going to be 6,096. And if we subtract 5,600, which was our loan amount, we get 496. So if you subtract 1492 minus 496, you'll find that it's $996 less. So you're going to save yourself a lot of interest if you pay it off in 1 year instead of 3. However, not everybody can come up with $500 a month. Much easier to come up with about $200 a month. So the bottom line is you're going to pay more interest, but you may not have a choice if you want to, get this credit card paid off. All right, so that would indicate our answer was C. All right, let's look at 25. So we're using the fundamental counting principle, which is if you do one thing in m ways and you can do another thing in n ways, then there's a total of m times n ways to do both. And so in this case, there's 3 things. There's 4 ways to choose a salad, 10 ways to choose a main course, and 4 ways to choose a dessert. And so you just multiply 4 times 10 times 4, and you'll see there's 160 ways to choose the 3 course meals. Let's move on to number 26. Let's see, when you roll a die, you can get any of the numbers from 1 through 6. What's the probability of getting a 7? Well, it's the number of favorable outcomes divided by the total number of outcomes. There aren't any 7s, so there's 0 ways, or 0 favorable outcomes, because you can't get a 7 out of a total of 6 possible outcomes, so you do get 0 here. Okay. The biology faculty at a college consists of 7 professors, 14 associate professors, 11 assistant professors, and 8 instructors. If one faculty member is randomly selected, so we're just choosing one, find the probability of choosing a professor or an instructor. So there's a formula we have. These are called mutually exclusive events. In other words, if you select one faculty member, it's not possible that you could choose both a professor and an instructor. And so we say these are mutually exclusive. So the probability of A or B is equal to the probability of A plus the probability of B. Now, usually it'll say minus the probability of A and B, but there is no, the probability of getting both of these is 0. So we don't need this part when we're dealing with mutually exclusive events. So in this case, the probability, oops, I lost my screen again. The probability of choosing a professor or an instructor is equal to the probability of choosing a professor plus the probability of choosing an instructor. Well, let's see, if you add these up, there's a total of 40 people or faculty members. And how many of them are professors? Well, there's 7. So your probability of getting a professor is 7 out of 40. Your probability of getting an instructor, well, there's 8 of those. So 8 out of 40. So when you add here, you get 15 out of 40. And that does reduce to 3/8. Now hopefully your arithmetic skills with fractions are solid, but you do have a calculator to help you here. 7 fraction 40 plus, whoops, I didn't get out of my fraction, so I got to delete. Let's get out. Oh goodness. There we go. Plus 8 fraction 40, and when you hit enter, it gives you the final answer of 3/8. Let's see, a single die is rolled twice. Find the probability of getting a 4 the first time and a 3 the second time. Talks about, oops, you can't see that. Talks about these being independent events. In other words, when you roll the first time and you're trying to get a 4, that's not going to affect your probability when you roll the die the second time. Your probability of getting the 3 is not going to be affected by that. Each time you roll a die, there's a 1 in 6 chance you're going to get any of the numbers on the die, 1 through 6. So we learn that the probability of A and B is equal to the probability of A times the probability of B when we're dealing with independent events like this. And so the probability of getting a 4 is 1/6. The probability of getting a 3 on the second roll is 1/6. And so there's a 1 in 36 chance that we'll get a 4 and then a 3. Let's move on to 29. Let's see, the city council of a small town needs to determine if the town's residents will support the building of a new library. The council decides to conduct a survey of a sample of the town's residents. Which one of the following procedures would be most appropriate for obtaining a sample of the town's residents? Well, we want it to be representative of the town. So we could survey a random sample. So basically that means every person in the sample could be chosen within each neighborhood of the town. So in other words, this is done randomly. You're not just picking all your friends or just all women, but it's random in each neighborhood of the town. So this sounds like a pretty good answer here. We could survey the librarians who live in the town. Well, that would be a biased sample since we're talking about whether we're going to support building a new library. I'm assuming librarians would want to do that. Survey every 4th person who enters the old library. Well, there's still some bias there because these are people that use the library. We want to know what the town as a whole feels. Let's try D. Survey 500 individuals who are randomly selected, that sounds good, from a list of all people living in the state in which the town is located. Well, we don't want the people in the state deciding for the town, so A is definitely our best choice here. All right, we're on our last page. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on these problems here. To find the median, you just want to pick the one that's in the middle, and since there's 6 pieces of data, you're going to want to order the data and then take the average of the 2 middle values. And so you should find that your 2 middle values are 92 and 99. And when you average that out, you get 95.5. To find the range, you'll just subtract your largest minus your smallest data value. And so here you should get 10. The scores on a driver's test are normally distributed. It means they have that bell-shaped curve look, with a mean of 100. Find the score that is 3 standard deviations above the mean if the standard deviation is 26. So the mean is 100, and we're 3 standard deviations above the mean, and each standard deviation is 26. If you add this up, you get 178. And so 178 is the data value that's 3 standard deviations above the mean. That's what this would indicate. All right, last problem. Determine whether the following statement makes sense or does not make sense and explain your reasoning. A candidate has a majority of the vote. That means they have at least 51.1% of the vote, or more than 50%, yet lost the election using the plurality method. Well, the plurality method means that you just got the most votes of the candidates. Now, if there's only 2 candidates and you got the most vote, you would have to have a majority. You're over 50%. And if you had more, like say there were 3, maybe each of you got about 33%, but nobody got a majority. So the bottom line, though, is if you got a majority, that means you got more than 50%, which means you couldn't have lost using the plurality method. There's no way that anybody else could have gotten more votes than you. You got over half the votes. And so the statement below that would express this, the statement does not make sense because a candidate that has a majority must also have a plurality. All right, and so that's it for the review. If you have any questions, just contact me and I'll do whatever I can to clarify anything that's not clear. Good luck on the final.